And the folks who've been in charge are doing anything but paying attention to those issues. You know, in 2019, I told my personal story of abuse on the House floor, warning my colleagues what would happen when they passed the most extreme abortion ban in the country. And instead of listening, they went forward. And now there is a bill and a law in place that does not have exceptions for the 12-year-old rape victim from her family member. There are women all across the state of Missouri right now bleeding out on their own bathroom floors because our doctors can't do their jobs. I'm running for governor because I will uphold the will of voters. I will get politicians out of your doctor's offices, out of your personal business, and protect your freedoms.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you as well to the Missouri Press Association and the candidates who are willing to put their name on the ballot. I think most of you know my story. I was born to a single mother. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. And my brother and my sisters and I just worked odd jobs to literally put food on the table and keep a roof over our house. Most people would say I was at a disadvantage growing up, but I would argue that I had a family of love, of faith, and one that promoted hard work. And I lived in a country, in a state, where you start doesn't necessarily determine where you finish in life. I think all Missourians should be able to live the American dream, no matter what their background is or what neighborhood they grew up in. That's why I've been very, very involved in supporting and expanding Missouri's vocational and technical training to make sure Missourians are trained for the high-paying jobs that I know our employers have to offer. That's why I've tried to lead efforts to reduce burdensome regulation and red tape, cutting taxes for businesses so that they have the opportunity to invest capital in their businesses and provide for those jobs. I think Missouri's fundamental responsibility is that we provide safe neighborhoods, and that will be the thing we do, J1, by investing in the police, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Bill Slants.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the Missouri Press Association and for my fellow candidates on the dais up here. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Bill Slants. I'm your Libertarian candidate for governor. I want to tell you just a little bit of story here. I'm going to imagine yourselves riding down the road. You're driving your car into a very new territory, a city you've never been in before. And what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to turn the radio down. You sit up in your seats, and you start paying much closer attention to what's going on around you. As libertarians, and I know all of you are libertarians out there, most of you just don't know it, I'm asking you to stop letting the government drive. Sit up in your seat, pay attention to what's going on, and let's limit the government to its most basic functions. Thank you.
Paul Lehman.
I'm Paul Lehman. I grew up and was born and raised in southeast Missouri. We got a representative from there. And a family of 8 children. I have two children of my own and 3 grandchildren. I was educated at Southeast Missouri State University with a BS in education, and then from Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis with a degree, a Master of Divinity degree, and so I'm an ordained minister. So I have education experience, I have a ministerial experience, and I want to run for governor to be able to be the first green governor of the state of Missouri. There's lots of things that the big, not elephant, but the big gorilla in the room is the need for green economy.
All right, candidates, thank you for those opening statements. We will now proceed to questions, and I will ask the first one. Missouri law currently prohibits abortion except in cases of medical emergency. A proposed constitutional amendment on the November ballot would create a right to abortion. Do you support this amendment? Why or why not? Crystal Quaid, you are first.
I absolutely do support Amendment 3. You know, we had over 380,000 Missourians sign a petition in less than 3 months saying that they wanted to vote on this issue, and I'm very grateful that we were able to do so here in November. Look, as I mentioned in my opening, the law that we have in Missouri right now is the most extreme in the entire country, without exceptions for rape or incest. And I personally have received phone calls from women who have gone to doctor's offices during an active miscarrying situation and sent home being told that they're not close enough to death yet. Our doctors are scared to do their jobs. Over 800 doctors just signed a a letter this very week saying that they supported Amendment 3 because they're scared to go to prison to give access to health care. While my opponent most recently said that he is willing to sacrifice his own campaign to make sure Amendment 3 goes down, I will be a governor that will listen to the will of voters and get politicians out of your doctor's offices.
Mike Kehoe.
Amendment 3, I think, could be one of the most harmful constitutional amendments I've ever seen on the ballot. I will do all I can to see that Amendment 3 is defeated. My wife and I are the mother and father of 4 kids, and I recently found out just the last couple of weeks we're about to be a grandparent. I think that Missourians and elected officials' number one priority is protecting innocent life, the life of who can't speak for themselves. And I have had that conversation about exceptions, and I understand that there's some people that think that we need to work on that. But this law goes way too far. It's very extreme. I think there's a lot of problems in this wording of the ballot where it doesn't provide protections, appropriate protections to women, especially in the case of liability if there's a medical emergency. I just believe this law has gone too far. I would love to support other ways for families to grow, including adoption, measures that we can do with our state, and support pregnancy resource centers across our state to truly give women's health the proper role it needs and take care of our ladies across the state.
Bill Slants.
I'm personally opposed to abortion quite dramatically. However, this is not a government decision. This is not something that should be decided in Jeff City over a mass, one size fit all for everybody. It's unique to each and everybody. Each individual out there has an individual decision to make. Abortion, like end-of-life decisions, should be done with a counsel of your most trusted person, your doctor, yourself, interbeing. There's a very personal decision. The government should stay out of it. And having said that, there should be no government funding for abortions at all, period.
Paul Lehman.
I support the Amendment 3. The Green Party has been supportive of women's rights since day one, or since Roe v. Wade, and have championed that openly. And only recently have other parties stepped up to endorse that. My position on that is that people don't know what the trauma that women undergo, those who try to make that decision about whether or not to have abortion. And so we should remember that as government, that we have no business, as the bill said here, in the medical lives of individuals until viability. So I strongly endorse that measure so that we can have some kind of order and some kind of justice for women who are facing these very difficult decisions.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Alvin, and it will go first to Mike Kehoe. Alvin?
One of our November ballot measures would raise Missouri's minimum wage from its current amount of $12.30 an hour to $13.75 an hour next year and $15 an hour in 2026, with annual inflationary adjustments in following years. It also would require paid sick leave. Do you support this ballot measure? Why or why not?
Mike Kehoe.
As a Missouri businessman and somebody who's created hundreds of jobs over the 35-year period I've been in business, I would not be able to support the minimum wage petition. I believe that government should not be setting wages for people. I think the economy and business should. And when we change minimum wage standards, we actually affect those that we're trying to help the most. Minimum wages will cause prices to rise on the most basic of products. It also leaves a void for the youngest of people who want to start at an entry-level job. You take those jobs away from them, so you kind of create this false economy where kids don't have a job, and the products that the people who are buying, who can't afford it the most, the wages are going up on. We need to make sure that we let businesses set the wage. That's the appropriate place for that to happen, and that's where I think works best. Letting government involved in this does not work. The economy can set the prices.
Bill Slants.
Well, I agree with most of that. I oppose the minimum wage, absolutely. There should be no minimum wage in the state of Missouri. Entry-level jobs are not meant to be supporting of one's life or family. An entry-level job is a way to learn a skill. It's a way to learn, find your way into the workplace. Minimum wage, believe it or not, was actually invented to oppress those who were not qualified to, not in the unions or not in the tradespeople. They wanted to keep lower wage earners out of the workforce. So this is a completely upside down, backwards way of looking at things. I strongly oppose a minimum wage of any kind.
Paul Lehman.
I support the minimum wage amendment. In fact, the Green Party puts forth a $25 minimum wage goal, and that this is just partly on the way in a state that we live in. People need to be compensated for what they do. It's hard work for these low-income people, working poor, and then we want to suppress them even more by not allowing them a decent minimum floor for their wages. So I strongly support this and hope that we can use this as a platform for doing even more to support the poor in our economy. This goes across the board. It goes into the agricultural world as well, and where we need to upgrade do a kind of a complete overhaul of our agricultural system.
Crystal Quaid.
I do, and this is yet another example where the status quo in Jefferson City is not listening to Missouri citizens and what their needs are. We've heard on this stage that minimum wage jobs are entry-level jobs and they're just for kids. The reality is we have so many parents and so many people who are working minimum wage jobs, multiple minimum wage jobs to get by because they can't actually find good quality, high-paying jobs in the state of Missouri. I absolutely support this amendment, but one of the things that I want to elevate for this is the earned sick leave. As a working parent myself, I understand what it means when my kid gets sick and I have to call in and wonder what that means for my job and my security. And I have, and prior to becoming a legislator, I've had good jobs, but not everybody has that affordability where their employer is flexible with them. And so a mandatory earned sick leave, a minimum wage for Missouri citizens is absolutely what we need, and we should be striving for that.
The next question will come from Christine, and we'll go first to Bill Slants. Christine?
A November ballot measure would legalize sports betting in Missouri. Do you support this amendment? Why or why not?
Bill?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Christine. I do support sports betting in the state of Missouri. Why not? It's not going to hurt anybody. What I oppose is putting all these regulations into sports betting, which only help the big guys, only help the large casinos, or only help the major entities, and it doesn't let the mom and pop shops go in there. So if you're going to legalize sports betting and you're only going to allow those major casinos to do sports betting, you're still going to have you're going to have your bookies out there still doing it for people who don't want to gamble at Caesar's Palace. I'm greatly offended that you sugarcoat the whole sports betting with proceeds going to education. I think that's a nonsense idea. It's this way of getting a bad tasting pill down your throat. But sports betting certainly should be legalized, no doubt.
Paul Lehman.
I oppose that proposal. And when I grew up, it was a common knowledge that betting of any kind or gambling of any kind was a sin. And the fundamentalist churches listed that as one of their many sins. And now we've come to a point where we want to endorse that type of activity by the state, by the government. And so it goes against the will of the people in the past. And also the use of those funds for education that is totally erroneous and deceptive, because that money would go into the education fund, and as we know what the legislature will do, they'll say, oh, we've got all this money, so we don't need to budget any. And so the promise that will improve education or increase it is a farce and not true.
Crystal Quaid.
Yeah, I do support this ballot initiative or this measure. And this is one, again, that I wish the legislature had been able to actually get this done appropriately. I don't love everything and all of the wording in this, but we've seen for years that the status quo in Jefferson City are in gridlock and fighting with each other instead of actually moving legislation through. I think what's important about this discussion is absolutely we need to be partnering it with conversations around addiction and funding for mental health services, which Missouri is drastically failing at. But the reality is that we have currently right now people in the state of Missouri who are crossing the border in Kansas or St. Louis. If you drive over there, you can actually see them pulled over on the side of the road, placing their bets and then coming home. That is revenue that we're missing out on. And due to all of the corporate tax cuts that have been happening in the state of Missouri and the tax cuts for the wealthiest in our state, we do have a shortage of funding in our state for things like education, mental health care, and all of the things that we desperately want to support. And so I do support this measure and the money that will come in from that.
Mike Kehoe?
So all of our surrounding states already have sports gambling as a product that their citizens can take advantage of. We're sitting in the center of an area that does not have it. So if you want to be competitive with your surrounding states, whether that's economic-wise or to the representative's points, people are driving across the state line, placing those bets. I think this is something that's time for Missouri. I'm not a fan of gambling, and I don't bet on games, but I believe it's a tool that we need for Missourians to additional recreation for those. I do think what the ballot measure provides funding for is appropriate because I've been a big fan of making sure our public education gets funded, and then we would make sure, should I be selected governor, that the legislature would never be able to move that to some other category. We'll keep it to where it's at. And last but not least, I mean, we have some gems in our state that are called major league sports teams. They provide a lot of entertainment, a lot of economic benefit to our state, and this would be something that would help us ensure those teams potentially stay in the state of Missouri.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Lucas, and it will go first to Paul Lehman. Lucas?
Thank you. Missouri's budget for the current fiscal year is around $50 billion, including both state and federal funds. That's about double of what it was a decade ago. What do you think about the size of Missouri's budget? And are there any areas you want to cut or areas you'd like to spend more?
Paul?
Thank you. Hello, Southeast Missouri. I don't know the details of that, but what I know in general is that the budget is probably not big enough because we have an education system that is broken and underfunded. We have an agricultural system that, or I should say, people living in rural areas who don't have medical care, and the hospitals are leaving the country in the rural areas and leaving people stranded. We have so much poverty in the U.S. The kids in my local school at Fayette, half of them have to take free lunches. So the budget needs to be reallocated, less money for the National Guard to send them down to Texas, where they twiddle their thumbs while they're down there, and bring them back, use that money for education and other areas and for environmental transition.
Crystal Quaid.
With our budget being the largest that it's been and continuing to grow, I know folks are very frustrated when we continue to rank on the bottom for everything in the entire country. From the lowest paid teachers to the lowest education funding. As mentioned, we've lost 18 rural hospitals in the last decade. We've got parts of our state that still don't have access to broadband internet. We've got roads and bridges crumbling. We have police officer shortages everywhere in the state of Missouri. The city of St. Louis alone, it needs 300 additional police officers to do their jobs. We are not balancing our budget well. I like to call our budget a moral document, or at least it should be, and we should be investing in people to make their everyday lives better, not putting in pork special interests for whatever legislator is trying to get something done for their hometown. We need to be really investing in the needs of everyday citizens.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, I've been proud to be a part of the budget process, and it has been growing, and it's grown too much. But we're going to see some tougher times on the horizon ahead, and I know for a fact that we're going to want somebody in the governor's office who understands what budgets are about and what hard decisions are about. We need to make sure we continue to fund, and we have continued to fund, our essential services and public safety and education. But as we go forward, we're going to have to make sure that we have somebody who's ready to make a decision on how the budget gets crafted as we move forward. The budget has grown most of all from the last couple of years through federal resources that came after the COVID crisis. But our general revenues has grown as well, and that's a good thing. That means our economy is growing, and I'm a big fan of making sure businesses can survive and grow, because that's what it takes to give Missourians opportunities. But the budget is going to be tough the next couple of years, and I would suggest you're going to want somebody there who understands what a budget's about and how to craft this going forward.
Bill Slants.
I see this very differently from my other three opponents up here. I think the Missouri budget should be cut in half, if not more. I would first end personal property tax. Also, let's end the income tax, state income tax in Missouri. You cut the 50% of the budget if you stop taxpayer-funded education. Taxpayer-funded education isn't working. You can throw more money at it all you want. It still isn't going to work. Local education is the way to manage this. Manage it with your local communities. Taxpayer-funded social services should be completely eliminated. This is also something that should be managed at the local level. Statewide, people in Jefferson City have no idea what's going on in Joplin that way. You have to manage these things locally, and let the local communities take care of their education. Let the local communities take care of their things. If need be, if you have to fill the coffers up, let's do it with a usage tax. You can do it through sales tax and fuel tax. But we don't need an income tax. We don't need personal property tax.
All right, our next question will come from Alvin, and we'll go first to Crystal Quaid. Alvin?
There's a large focus nationally about immigration at our nation's southern border. As governor, are there any state policies related to immigration that you would support or oppose? Or do you think that the state policymakers should stay out of this topic?
Crystal?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The conversation around immigration right now in our country is real, and I know that so many Missourians are really nervous right now about the rise in crime and potential tying to that. Of course, we hear a lot about the parallels along with drug increase and trafficking in the state of Missouri. But here's the thing. As governor, the first thing that I would do, of course, is to work with our federal delegation. There's a bipartisan immigration bill that has been sitting in Washington for far too long. And as governor, I would work with our federal delegation to lean into that and make sure that we're getting something done. When it comes to what we can be doing right here, I want to talk about what we're doing to keep our communities safe, and going to the conversation that I previously mentioned of our shortage of law enforcement professionals and giving them the tools that they need to be successful. As mentioned, the city of St. Louis is down 300 officers. We just very recently had an entire division shut down because they didn't have anyone who would come work for the police force. And it's not just about raising salaries, it's about benefits, and it's about giving them the tools that they need to keep our communities safe. So as governor, my focus will be right here on Missouri, making sure that we're safe at home.
Mike Kehoe.
Yeah, immigration is the number one conversation I have, along with crime, as we travel the state and meet Missourians. It's absolutely out of control. Missouri has an estimated 77,000 illegal immigrants. We don't know exactly because there's not a database of those. And just in 2023 alone, we talked about the state budget. Missouri spent over $460 million on illegal immigrants. That could have been money that went to our teachers, or to our veterans, or back to our Missouri taxpayers. Along with the illegal immigration are coming deadly fentanyl drugs, Chinese deadly fentanyl drugs. I went to the border twice. I'm the only candidate, I believe, that's probably been down there twice. I've seen our men and women in our National Guard. They are working, they are brave, they are helping at the border. Along with our State Highway Patrol in McAllen, Texas, where 1 year alone, they saw over 450 million doses of lethal fentanyl come across the border. It's killing our citizens. It's the number one killer of Missourians between 18 and 44. We need to stop the drugs and the gangs that are coming across the borders. They're hurting Missourians. They're hurting Missourian families.
Bill Slants.
Everyone in this room is a descendant of an immigrant. I welcome all immigrants. All I ask is that you sign the guest book on your way in. Immigrants provide a tremendous amount of great labor and great skills in this country the state needs. And I welcome them all. Like I said, just sign the guest book. We want to know you're here. We want to know what you're doing, why you're here. But fixing a major problem there, it would be to eliminate all taxpayer funds to anyone who's not contributing to society. Eliminate all taxpayer funds to immigrants. There's no housing, no food, no support, no social services for an immigrant that's coming in without any documentation, without anything at all. So let them support themselves, and welcome all. Thank you.
Paul Lehman.
There are the immigrants contrary to their being an expense on the government, they are an asset. I've just read an article that says that the immigrants produce $6.8 million of income for the state, and that they pay taxes also, whether documented or undocumented. Their employer is paying the taxes, but it's through them. And what the problem at the border is the bottleneck of processing. We need to, our Green Party candidate Jill Stein would upgrade that to the processing process. And in Missouri, we would also implement programs to integrate the immigrants who are already here and to try to teach them English, to help them with their social programs and bring them out of the shadow and make them a full partner in our great economy.
All right, the next question will come from Christine and go first to Mike Kehoe. Christine?
Missouri currently uses tax credits as an incentive for a lot of things, for specific businesses to expand, to renovate historic buildings, to develop affordable housing, or to encourage donations to food pantries. These tax credits collectively subtracted $669 million from Missouri's treasury in 2023. Do you believe changes are needed to Missouri's tax credit structure? If so, what would you change?
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you for the question. Tax credits are something that absolutely need to be looked at to make sure they're giving a good return on investment to Missourians. We have several tax credit programs that don't do that. However, we have some that really do that well. And that's something that, as a business person looks at any kind of program that they have within their business, you have to make sure it's something, again, that's working for Missouri citizens, and it is something that we couldn't do without. For instance, our Housing Development Corporation, back when Ronald Reagan was president, he said the federal government cannot build housing, which they can't, and so they turned it over to a private-public development where we can use tax credits to build affordable housing across our communities. We've worked very hard to get that program more accountable in the last several years, raising the responsibility for the developer and ensuring Missourians get a good return on their investment. But there are other tax credit programs, quite frankly, that need to be looked at and revamped, and I would love to be able to do that and try to get that all in front of people so we make sure the right ones are going out to the right people.
Bill Slants.
My father always says less is more. I've already told you I'd like to eliminate the income tax of the state, and I would like to end tax credits. That's all I have.
Paul Lehman.
I think tax credits are good. They're important to help people with their struggling to make ends meet, to make the dollar go farther. However, often these are extended to the working poor who don't even pay taxes. So there's no incentive or no benefit to those people. So what needs to happen is a fundamental shift and change in the way we do business in our state, and so that we can support the working poor and lift up the middle class as well.
Crystal Quaid.
I do support those tax credits. We're sitting in a very district that utilizes historic tax credits all the time. As somebody who's served on the budget committee in our state legislature, I will say I would like to see some more oversight, as mentioned, to make sure that the return on investment for the tax credits that we're currently allowing to happen are actually good investments that are benefiting our state. But I want to have an even bigger conversation around tax credits and who they're actually helping and how we can expand on tax credits for everyday Missourians. One of the things that I hear the most about from folks is the problem with finding affordable and accessible childcare. And then I also hear at the same time the enormous expense that our families are taking on for elder care. One tax credit that I would like to support, and I've had this discussion in Jefferson City and filed legislation, is tax credits for early childhood education and tax credits for elder care. So many of our families are stuck in the middle where they've got a kiddo in daycare and then they're also taking care of their aging parents. And we as a state, when we're talking about tax credits, again, need to be putting everyday working class Missourians at the forefront of these discussions.
Thank you. The next question will come from Lucas and go first to Bill Slants. Lucas.
While we're on the tax discussion, Missouri's individual income tax rate is set to decline to 4.7% in January, marking the fourth straight year of tax cuts. Do you support further tax cuts to Missouri's income tax rates or other taxes, such as sales or property taxes? If so, do you have a plan to offset a portion of the lost tax revenues?
Bill Slants.
Well, we've heard my answer to this question already, but 4.7 is a good number to start with. But bringing it down to 0 is a much better number. My plan, if you need to fill the coffers with some kind of money, would be on use tax. You would do that through either through sales tax or fuel tax. But by eliminating 50% of the Missouri budget, this amount of increase in sales and use tax would be very small, a small portion of that increase. What this does is it actually puts the services that Missouri is providing. It puts that directly in that phase. So your fuel tax is going to pave the highways and help build the infrastructure, and sales tax will take care of the rest of the budget. So. Don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I try to manage that, or try to get that through. Take it from 4.7 down to 0.
Paul Lehman.
4.7% doesn't sound like a very much when you're making $100,000 or $1 million. People can live on very nicely on the income left after paying their taxes. We need to have a graduated income tax. I'm not familiar with the details, so that the wealthy in our state, and we have a lot of them, can pay more their fair share. In the biblical analogy, you have the 10 talents, 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent parable. They often forget that the 10-talent person is paying back 10 talents, and whereas the 1 talent is supposed to pay back 1. So the burden, there needs to be a shift in taxation. And also another way to approach this is to provide universal health care, which is a major expense in people's lives. So we need to adopt that so that people have more income and the wealthy can support that opportunity to have equal access to health care.
Crystal Quaid.
Yeah, as governor, I want to have a real conversation around a fair tax structure. I don't think a lot of Missourians realize that right now in the state of Missouri, that the tax bracket, the top tax bracket, if you make $8,500 a year, you're paying the exact same tax rate as a millionaire. And so, yes, the time in Jefferson City that I've been there, we've seen a lot of tax cuts. We've seen income tax cuts. We've seen tax cuts for corporations and for the wealthiest in the state of Missouri. I want to have conversations around taxes that actually impact, again, everyday working class folks. Conversations around getting rid of things like the food tax. I know as a mom, when I go grocery shopping for my family, I see the increased cost of buying groceries every single day is a real thing that's impacting folks. I want to have conversations around taxes on feminine hygiene products or diapers. Again, things that are impacting everyday Missourians, and a real true evaluation of our tax structure in the state so that the wealthiest here are paying their fair share, and that we're able to make up those differences by taxing things like private planes or other things that the wealthiest are getting by with in our state while the rest of us are struggling to get by.
Mike Keogh.
This is a conversation that we have constantly about what's the appropriate structure. I believe there should be 0 income tax, but you have to do it responsibly. You have to get it to a point where you're not affecting essential services and education. And when I tell people that story, they're like, how is that possible? I'm like, well, 5 years ago, we were at 6%, and now we're about to be at 4.7%. But you haven't seen any cuts to education or essential services. There's a way to manage this correctly. And most importantly, I believe that Missourians can spend their money way better than any elected official could ever spend it. Missourians understand what to do once they have more money in their pocket. It's the largest amount of tax Missourians pay each year, and I believe putting money in their pocket is much more essential. And last but not least, when it comes to economic development and you want us to compete as a state, as your governor, when I go compete for businesses to move here or existing businesses to expand, I need to be able to have the same tools in the toolbox that Tennessee and Texas and Florida and other states do when they go have those meetings in the boardroom with those large companies that want to invest and create jobs in our state. That's the way we grow our economy. That's the way we provide opportunities for Missourians.
The next question will come from Alvin. It will go first to Paul Lehman. Alvin?
Missouri generally prohibits local governments from enacting their own firearms restrictions. Should the state give local governments greater authority to pass their own gun ordinances? Are there any state-level firearm laws that you would support, such as a red flag law, a 72-hour waiting period, or tax breaks to encourage the purchase of gun safes and trigger locks?
Paul Lehman.
That should be, in a sense, a separate issue as far as the state regulations of firearms. But on the local level, the problem that struck me is about local control. We've gone the wrong way about taking away local control on various issues, like whether or not they want a polluting CAFO in their backyard. They're not allowed to do that, or to determine the budget for policing in Kansas City. That's another avenue of taking local control away from the local community. And as was said here just a minute ago, Missourians know how to take care of themselves, and they don't need the state to dictate to them what they can and can't do on a local level. And so I believe that there needs to be an increased effort to control firearms, to ban assault weapons. Would be a good start, and then do a great background check. Okay.
Crystal Quaid.
Yeah, I grew up in rural Southwest Missouri, and so I understand firsthand the need for firearms when you've got a copperhead coming after your chickens, right? Like, I understand that. But I also understand the real conversations that we need to be having in the state of Missouri. You know, I've talked with law enforcement officers all across the state and asked them, what is it that you need to be successful? And one of the things we hear the most about is access to firearms, particularly with youth. You know, just very recently, we had a school shooting at CVPA in St. Louis, where unfortunately people died. That family reached out to law enforcement officers multiple times for them to come out and meet with the family, because that person who had access was in a mental health crisis, and they wanted those guns to be taken away just temporarily while they were able to keep that child safe and get them the help that they needed. Law enforcement could not actively go in and do their jobs, and because of that, we had people die. When we talk about the conversation around local control, of course, what's going on in Webster County, where I grew up, is different than what's going on in inner city St. Louis. And I do support the conversation around letting communities decide what is best for them, working with their law enforcement officers, working with parents and their local municipalities to find out what really will be helpful.
Mike Keogh.
One of the most fundamental rights we have as citizens of this country is our Second Amendment rights. I grew up in a different environment in inner city St. Louis, and it was an environment that was multiple gangs were literally right outside the door of our house. None of those folks that were carrying weapons then or today went to the store to purchase them. So every time we put more restrictions on a citizen's Second Amendment rights, we actually hurt the citizens who are trying to do this law-abiding and legally. We need to make sure we understand that as we move forward, we don't infringe on those rights. We continue to work with existing laws and support our police to reduce crime, improve mental health, and make sure that we're doing the right thing to take the criminals off the street and not allow them to be there to acquire these weapons. Second Amendment rights will always be something that I am very strong to work on and to make sure we protect for all Missourians and all people across this country.
Bill Slants.
I agree. The Second Amendment should not be infringed. I don't see where local gun laws are going to help at all. In local gun law, if you're traveling from county to county and that law happens to be different from one county to the next, what's going to happen to the gun holder that has got a gun in his car? This community says yes, that community says no, and now you're driving across the county lines, and it gets kind of messy. So I can't agree to any type of gun control in that way. And Mike is absolutely right. Criminals do not buy guns from stores. Law-abiding citizens register their guns and let people know they're going to use them, which I don't even agree with there. I think if you want to buy a gun, go buy a gun, and I don't need to even let anybody know I bought it. But I see no purpose for gun control at all.
The next question comes from Christine, goes first to Crystal Quaid. Christine?
Virtually every governor in every state talks about the importance of good jobs for residents. How would you encourage economic development in Missouri? Are there particular sectors or types of jobs that you would emphasize?
Crystal Quaid.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Good jobs is one of the most important things that a governor can do, is to set the stage and the plans for this. Look, the reality is that I think as a state we need to understand that not everybody needs a four-year degree, and not everybody wants to go to college. And so step one is making sure that we have good pathways to good paying jobs that provide good benefits, partnering with folks like our labor unions and our local community colleges and giving them the support that they need to train up talent that is accessible for our business owners. You know, when we talk to business owners, it's imperative that we ask them, what do you need in a trained workforce, and that we're working together to be able to provide that. But the other thing that's really important about bringing good jobs to the state of Missouri are things like infrastructure, things like access to internet, things like access to healthcare. As mentioned, you know, there are places in the state that don't have access to broadband right now. As mentioned, there are places in the state of Missouri where folks drive almost an hour to get to an emergency room. So when you're a small business owner trying to recruit somebody to come work for you in some of our rural parts of our state, and you tell them that we have underfunded education systems, you're not going to be able to get to a doctor within an hour in case you have an emergency. Oh, and you might not have internet for your teenager. They're not going to want to come to Missouri.
Mike Keogh.
I'm proud to have a record of creating hundreds of jobs for Missourians across the state in my several businesses that I owned, with the help of a lot of people, by the way. So workforce development and making sure Missourians have an opportunity is essential to how the state continues to grow. You know, a little over 60% of Missourians do not attend a four-year college or university. We have some great colleges and universities, including right here in Springfield and across the state. But we also need to provide an opportunity for those men and ladies whose heart is in a different spot. So improving career and technical education opportunities across our state is vital to me. Working with labor, working with other organizations that have incredible training programs to put people on the job and get them in a nice, high-paying, skilled wage is very important to us. That's how we grow our state economy. Putting more money in Missourians' pockets always results in a good outcome. And I believe with my experience of actually creating jobs across the state, we'll be the jobs leader should I be elected governor.
Bill Slants.
I agree with Mike. California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, companies are just are flying out of those states at a massive rate here because of high tax rates. You want to create good jobs here in the state of Missouri. Get rid of the business income tax. Get rid of the business tax period. Don't tax these businesses. Let those businesses use their proceeds to pay and train their employees. This is the best way to get good jobs in the state of Missouri. Get rid of any business tax you have there. You'll see the jobs come.
Paul Lehman.
Of course, we need good jobs, but we need to stop the slide away from that. So when people talk about creating jobs, they're usually talking about low-income, low-wage jobs that are paid to sometimes minimum wage or a little better, a little above that, and not a living wage, which would be more like $25 an hour, and that's even low. So in the farming sector, which I have a special interest in, the farmers are leaving the land because they're not getting the money for their labor and proper labor. And that's because of these industrial agricultural complex that's driving farmers off the land and preventing them from growing. We talk about regulation. Small businesses are over-regulated so that they can't function. And if we had the universal health care, that would be one thing that they wouldn't have to worry about in their efforts.
The next question will come from Lucas and go first to Mike Kehoe.
It seems there has been an increase in online threats made by juveniles against other students in schools and in some cases businesses. What, if anything, do you think should be done about this at the state level?
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you, Lucas, for the question. Just coincidentally, I had a long conversation about with a sheriff from Cole County last night about this very issue. We really are struggling right now with juvenile officers across the state and making sure they're in the right position and we make sure we have access to them, because should a young person go online and make some sort of threat, the local law enforcement can pick that person up, but then they get turned over to the juvenile officer. I believe that we need to work with the courts and with lawmakers to make sure we have different penalties for juveniles that would assess threats, especially as threats against schools and other institutions that really create chaos within that institution, and then give the juvenile officers the tools they need to deal with those juveniles once they're turned over to them. They do not have the right tools in the toolbox to do that right now. These threats are serious, and a lot of it has to come from supervision. A lot of it has to come from parenting skills and guardian skills that are making sure that these young folks understand that when you're doing this, you're affecting a lot of lives, and there are going to be real consequences that come with it.
Bill Slants.
Yeah, I'm saddened by the growth of online threats in this state and around the country. And some of them are done by cowards. Online is not confronting your opponent and avoiding getting punched in the nose. Mike touched on a good point. Supervision, when you're talking especially about juveniles, younger juveniles, and I know this is virtually impossible today, but supervision and discipline at the local level, at the parent level, at the clergy level is the best way to combat this, convincing young people that this is just the wrong way to go about doing things. But it's going to happen, and it can't be avoided.
Paul Lehman.
I'm sorry, I was reeling from my last answer. What was the question?
It seems there's been an increase in online threats made by juveniles against other students in schools, in some cases businesses. What, if anything, do you think should be done by this at the state level?
I just heard a program that said that students learn more when they read from paper than they do by reading from a tablet, an online tablet. So to address the issue, one thing that we need to do in our schools is to return to paper learning, because that's the most effective way. And also the state can do a lot to control the traffic on these conglomerate internet companies, and need to study that and find ways to control that abuse that's done on the line.
Crystal Quaid.
Yeah, actually on Monday, I was in St. Louis at an event, and I had a middle schooler come up to me and asked if she could ask me a question, and she started to cry, and she said, "I'm scared to go to school." And then that very next day in St. Louis, up in Ladue, the high school had to shut down because of a threat. And I know right here at home, we had 2 in Nixa yesterday at elementary schools. This is a real problem, and we need to be listening to our young people about how absolutely terrified they are right now. When it comes to solutions in this space, yes, absolutely. We need to have conversations around actually making sure there are enough law enforcement officers and juvenile officers, and that we're funding them. We've had the same folks in charge in Jefferson City for 20 years, but yet we're still underfunding, and we can't find enough people to work in these spaces. That's a real problem. But then we also need to have conversations around mental health care. I'm a parent. I've had people in mental health crisis, and I've tried to access care and have gone through weeks and weeks of loopholes trying to find someone, and actually told that I had to send my family member to California to get them the help that they need. We have a real crisis happening right now, not just in our state and in our country, and we need real leaders who are going to have honest conversations around what's going on.
The next question comes from Alvin, and we'll go first to Bill Slants. Alvin?
We're going to stay on school safety. Now, you mentioned your thoughts on banning any type of weapon, but if we are going to keep schools safe, what are your thoughts on how exactly we can keep students safe in their schools?
Bill Slants.
So first and foremost, thank you. First and foremost, I'm serious when I say that taxpayer-funded education should end. This should bring local education or education to the local community. So we're going to put that on the local community to police their safety. If we had schoolhouses that were in the community and not in a rural area where we had to bus kids in on a daily basis, where we had smaller schools with more focused teachers, I think this issue of school safety would become a lot less invasive. So I'm all about educating the children. I question whether or not the state should even have a mandate against education, but certainly we should educate children at the local level.
Paul Lehman.
All of the mass school shootings have been done with weapons that were registered. And so we need to do, as Crystal was indicating, we need to address the mental health crisis that our country is in, that we need to devote more money and more efforts to our mental health division of the state, and so that they can go into schools and counsel students. We need to bar the assault rifle, the weapon of choice, and do more diligence, as we are doing, about keeping kids safe in the school setting. So it's important that we focus on the big picture of why is the U.S. society so vicious in our gun activity, whereas compared to other countries all around the world.
Crystal Quaid.
I had the great honor of serving on the Springfield Public Schools Task Force for many years, while here in our local community we were evaluating what school buildings needed improvements and what we could do from a local community level. And so by doing that, I've learned a lot about so many of our buildings across the state that match up with this, that are very old. A lot of our kiddos are going to elementary schools that were built in the early 1900s. And we can do a lot from an investment standpoint in terms of infrastructure, looking at the vestibules and making sure that there is like a level of entry before somebody from the outside gets inside to the office. A lot of our schools here locally in Springfield have moved to that. Things like bulletproof glass, et cetera, that we can do from a state level to invest in. But the reality is again, we shouldn't be making our schools like a prison for our kids to be in and to stay safe in. So I want to have real conversations around investments with our local law enforcement officers to give them the tools that they need to be successful. And one of the things they continually talk to me about is the fact that kids have access to firearms and there's literally nothing that they can do about it. And so from a state level, it's about making investments to keep our buildings safe, doing what we can there, but then also working with our law enforcement.
Mike Kehoe.
Again, one of the fundamental problems with this issue is our young people have lost a respect for life, and I think that's starting at all levels in our society right now. That's the number one challenge, along with, has been mentioned up here multiple times, the mental health issues that we face. As I tell people all the time, it's the number one problem in our country that nobody wants to talk about. All families, including my own, have had struggles with mental health issues, and so making sure we have the appropriate professionals within the schools to identify kids who need help, I think is very important. I also think investing in school resource officers, or SROs, making sure the school districts have those men and ladies available on campus, that they have the appropriate training along with the faculty on what to have happen should one of these unfortunate events come forward. And then I think we can use technology. We have an incredible advantage right now in this country of technology that can detect various things that come into schools and make sure we monitor them so we have an advance warning if something unfortunate were to happen.
Right. We have time for one final question. Christine?
The Missouri Chamber of Commerce has stated the state faces a child care crisis because of a shortage of affordable providers. Do you agree, and what, if anything, would you propose to do about this?
Paul Lehman, you're first.
We need to enable more people to engage in child care. I think that a couple years ago there was further restrictions on what you could do to take care of children. That's one thing. We need to have universal health care so that monies can be used to provide child care and support the child care givers who need to do these things. And so it's broken. I mean, we have a broken system that needs to be corrected, and we need to value our child care givers and pay them a decent salary.
Crystal Quaid.
Yeah, when I first started running for office in 2015, and I would knock doors and I'd ask folks, what do you want from your state government? The number one thing I heard from folks was affordable childcare. And that's why one of the very first bills I filed when I got to Jefferson City had to do with affordable childcare. And I've been working on that issue ever since. And quite frankly, I'm really glad that folks in charge are starting to have this conversation, because I know people like my mom have been struggling with this for decades. When it comes to what we can do around childcare, the first thing that I want to say is the state of Missouri is drastically failing with this. I don't know if you all saw recently constantly in the news the past few weeks, but the state of Missouri right now is not even paying its child care providers' bills on time. We have lost 53 child care providers in the last year because the state of Missouri is not meeting its basic promises of what we are paying them for our subsidies and our foster kids. I've been meeting with child care providers all across the state, having conversation, asking how much are you owed, hundreds of thousands of dollars. These people are taking out personal loans to be able to keep their business afloat, and we talk about supporting small businesses, and we can't even meet these basic promises that we're doing. I want to have robust conversations around how we can increase not just access but affordability, but step one is making sure that the government is doing what it's promised and paying its bills on time to our child care providers.
Mike Kehoe.
The state is in a child care crisis, and this is a very personal issue to me. I can tell you as a young man, I watched my mother make a decision. Does she go to work and leave her child at home on a snow day so she can make enough money to buy groceries, or does she not go to work and not have enough money to buy groceries and stay home with her child? That's a decision no parent, especially no single mother, should ever have to face. The good news about the child care crisis, it's nonpartisan. This is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is a Missouri issue. We have $1.4 billion with a B of labor sitting at home annually in the state of Missouri because those working folks want to go to work and can't get child care. We need to make sure these facilities are safe, but we have to promote the ability for child care centers to open. We have to give options to businesses that want to build child care centers within their business, like they have here in Springfield at Cox South, like they have in Kansas City at Burns and McDonald Engineering. Those are the type of outside-the-box ideas we have to do to improve access to child care. And then I am in favor of the child care tax credit. I think that was a good move that we need to get through, and as governor, it will be a priority for me.
Bill Slants.
Child care is not should not be a state mandate. The state has no business in child care whatsoever. One of the reasons, or a reason why both parents are unable to stay home is because over the last 60 years, affordability of living at home has grown by 8 times. Used to be a single parent income could take care of a $20,000 house without an issue. Now a $400,000 house has to be paid for by both parents, which means the child has to be left alone. But in the bottom line, child care should be taken care of at the local community again, and by the home of the parents or home of the grandparents in some people's cases.
We will now go to closing statements. Paul Lehman, you are first, and you may begin.
Yes. I want to first start by saying that we can't cover everything today, but one of the looming clouds over the state of Missouri and over the nation and over the world is the opposition of the United States for a ceasefire in Gaza and in Palestine. And this war is beginning to spin out of control simply because we cannot force the Israelis to come to the table and do a ceasefire. So, having said that, I want to pivot back to the U.S. What that does is that it affects the environment that we live in, and so the gun violence is in an environment of gun control, and so we have to change the environment and change our attitude about people, and stop treating people as the other or as someone who is the enemy, someone that we cannot control, or that we must control. So we need to incorporate people into our. I'll stop.
Bill Slants.
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to be here, and thank you very much for having us. The candidates on stage right now are not here as a get-rich-quick scheme. These are the 4 of us standing in front of you are offering their leadership. It's not something that is going to make us wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and not even something that's going to make us all that powerful. We're here as virtual volunteers to care for the state and provide you with the best possible way of living that Missouri can possibly live in. I'm going to finish with what I started with. I think it's very importantly to the state would be to focus on eliminating most of the burdensome taxes that we have. The personal property tax and income tax needs to be given away. We can do that by cutting half the budget. And I appreciate you having me here today. Thank you.
Mike Kehoe.
Well, thank you again for the Press Association for hosting this and for the candidates that would be there. You know, I spent 40 years of my career as a small businessman creating jobs and opportunities for Missourians and rewarding success, not punishing it. If businesses and people want to do good, they should be allowed to do so. And I think government should play a role in that, not in creating jobs, but creating an environment where good jobs can grow and prosper. That's the administration I want to bring to Missourians. We want to continue, as I mentioned, with the career and technical training so that Missourians can take advantage of very good jobs with benefits that are out there. But first, we need to keep our Missourians safe. We need to keep our communities safe. That will be the priority for me on day one. We need to make sure that we fund and give the resources to our men and lady in the police departments and public safety all across the state, the resources they need to keep Missourians safe so Missourians can walk their own neighborhoods at night without ever having to be afraid. These are the things I'd like to do for you as governor, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th.
Crystal Quaid.
Well, thank you again to the Press Association and for the candidates for being here. I grew up a regular working class kid. My mom was a waitress most of my life, and my stepfather drove almost an hour to get to the factory. And because of their hard work and dedication, I'm the very first in my family to graduate high school. And I worked my way through Missouri State University to become a social worker. I got involved in government because there weren't enough regular people at the table making decisions. But I'm running for governor because we deserve better than what we've been getting. As mentioned here today, we rank lowest in education funding in the entire country. We have crumbling roads and bridges. We've lost 18 rural hospitals in the last decade. We have police officer shortages all across the state of Missouri, and we deserve better than this. Instead of investing in the things that matter most, what we have seen from my opponent and folks on the other side in Jefferson City are these continued government overreaches into our personal lives, whether it is in our doctor's offices, what books our kids can read. The focus of what's been coming out of Jefferson City is absolutely wrong. As your governor, I will get politicians out of your doctor's offices, out of your personal lives, and I will protect your freedoms. Thank you guys for being here.
Well, that concludes the Missouri Press Association candidate forums for governor. If you stick around in 20 minutes, we'll have Senate candidates on stage. But now is the time to give your applause to these gubernatorial candidates.
Testing, testing.
Good. Candidates, if you could make your way to your stage, we're about ready to start. Welcome to the Missouri Press Association Candidate Forum for U.S. Senate. I'd like to begin by introducing our participants and going over a few rules of the debate. I'm David Lieb with the Associated Press and will be serving as your moderator. Earlier today, candidates drew numbers to determine the order in which they will be making opening remarks. They are arranged on stage in that order, starting closest to me, Nathan Klein, Lucas Kuntz, Jared Young, and Josh Hawley. After candidates give their opening statements, I will ask the first question. Then we will proceed to questions from our panelists. Our panelists today are Alvin Reed of the St. Louis American, Christine Temple of the Springfield Business Journal, and Lucas Presson of the Southeast Missourian in Cape Girardeau. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. After each has had a turn, I will decide whether any rebuttal time is necessary. If so, candidates will receive an additional 30 seconds, but rebuttals will be reserved only for those candidates involved in criticisms. If candidates fail to answer a question, I also reserve the right to ask them to try again during the rebuttal time. The first question will go to the first candidate on my left, the second question will begin with the second candidate, and so forth. And closing remarks will be delivered in reverse order. Signs will be held up showing the time remaining during remarks. Candidates, please adhere to the stop sign. And audience, please hold your applause until today's event is over. With that, let's begin. Nathan Klein, you may deliver your opening statement.
Well, first I want to thank the Missouri Press Association for inviting all of the candidates so the Missourians can see all of their choices, and that's very important. I myself am not running against the other candidates on this stage. I'm running against the pay-to-play political system that has sold our democracy to the highest bidder. We all know that that is the case. I and other Green Party volunteers have worked thousands of hours over the last few years, standing on street corners, getting petition signatures so that I and other Green Party candidates can stand on this stage and give Missourians the choice to vote for a candidate that won't take corporate money, that won't take billionaires' money, and will serve just the people of Missouri. We think that's very important and very different than what we see happening, because we are not being served. If you're not a wealthy donor, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't have any say, and that ain't how it's supposed to work.
Lucas Kuntz.
All right. Hey, I just want to say how excited I am to be here. I've got my wife here, too. Thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody, for having us. You know, I'm just a kid who grew up in a working-class neighborhood in mid-Missouri. My parents, they were Catholic and followed the rules, so 4 kids. Ended up going bankrupt when my littlest sister had to have a heart surgery. And, for me, it's a really hard time for our family. And we made it through that time because the people in our neighborhood who didn't have any more money than we did, they passed the plate down at my mom's prayer group for us. They brought more food by the house than we can eat and really just took care of us. And I've spent my entire life trying to pay them back. A lot of folks in that neighborhood were veterans. One who was very special to me, who we lost this summer, was a Marine. And I thought the best way to pay them back would be to become a Marine like him. And so I did it. I deployed to Iraq. I deployed to Afghanistan twice. I worked in the Pentagon. This is next step in that service. I'm going to make sure that I serve the people of this state, the people of that neighborhood, take care of them, bring the money home, and help them make their own decisions in their lives.
Jared Young.
Thank you for having me here. Appreciate the invitation. I am here today because most Americans, and especially most Missourians, are completely disgusted and exhausted and frustrated with the state of our national politics. Our system is broken. Our leaders have completely lost the ability to disagree productively and engage with each other to solve problems. The two parties have decided that hatred and anger and contempt are their best tools for winning elections. And we need leaders who reject the party playbook. If we send Josh Hawley or Lucas Kunz to Washington, nothing will change about the way Washington works. I've spent my entire career engaging productively with people who come from all different kinds of backgrounds and have all different kinds of ideas, and working constructively with them to solve complex problems. And that's exactly the approach and the expertise that I will bring to Washington and U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Josh Hawley.
Thank you, David. Let's just get right to it. Our country is in crisis. And it's in crisis because of the policies of Lucas Kunz and his allies in power. They opened the border, 15 million illegals have come across. Now Kunz wants to give them amnesty. And then he wants to give them Social Security and Medicare, bankrupting those programs for our seniors. They shut down American energy production. Now Lucas Kunz wants to go further. He wants to ditch all fossil fuels. That's a direct quote. Ditch all fossil fuels, not just oil. That means gas and diesel. That means the biofuels that we blend right here in Missouri. That means bankruptcy for Missouri farmers and workers. He wants men in women's sports. He wants men in women's locker rooms. It's crazy. It's nuts. It's a nutty agenda. Now he's trying to run away from it. He won't even say who he's going to support in this election. Will it be Kamala Harris or will it be Donald Trump? I'm here today to get some answers and to force some accountability.
Wow, so the
rebuttals will start with the questions. Let's go with the first question. The first question has to do with abortion. Abortion policies have diverged greatly in states since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Would you support federal legislation to either establish a nationwide right to abortion or impose nationwide limits on when abortions can be performed? Or do you think the issue should be decided solely by states? The first question begins with Nathan Klein.
Well, I and the Green Party have always supported a woman's right to be in charge of her own body. We're not pro-abortion. We are pro-woman's right to be in charge of her own body. You can either give the right to the infant, the fetus, or the woman. You can't chop them in half. It's a hard choice, but the living woman is in charge of her own body. And the Green Party are in charge of making sure that right is enshrined throughout our country through whatever mechanism that we need to use to make sure that happens. And the Green Party and I will continue to work hard to make sure that the right of women to be in charge of their body remains, enshrined in our law.
Lucas Kunz.
Yeah, Missouri's got the most restrictive law in the country, right? We're the first state in the country to do that. It's Josh Hawley's abortion ban. It bans all abortion, even in cases of rape and incest from day one. I think that's wrong. I think Missourians are smart enough to make their own decisions about how they live their lives, how they build and protect their families. As a U.S. Senator, I'm going to promise you right now, I will codify Roe versus Wade because we can't have no exceptions for rape and incest like Josh Hawley has put into play. And it's critical that we do that and that we put me in the U.S. Senate on this issue because despite the fact that we have a constitutional amendment this fall where we are going to codify our rights to abortion, Josh Hawley has signed on to a national abortion ban. He wants to override the will of Missouri voters. I don't believe in that. I will protect in vitro fertilization, something he has refused to do twice now on the record. I will protect contraception because I believe that those things are important for everyday Missourians so that we can make our own decisions. This guy wrote an article in 2013 in the Springfield News Leader saying that both in vitro fertilization, the morning after pill, and other types of contraception are the exact same thing as abortion and should be treated like that. It's wrong, and I'm on the opposite side.
Jared Young.
I'm pro-life. I believe that every abortion is a tragedy, but I also believe the pro-life movement does itself a disservice by taking uncompromising and all-or-nothing positions. And I think the situation we see in Missouri right now is a perfect example of that. When Roe versus Wade was struck down, Missouri went all the way as extreme as it possibly could on abortion. And naturally, we had a backlash. And now we're in a position where Amendment 3, if it passes, is going to put us in a place that allows even more abortions than we had under Roe versus Wade. And so I think we need to find a place where we're preventing as many abortions as possible, but we're still leaving room for compromise. And that's an area where most Missourians can be comfortable. And if we can actually sit down and discuss it like reasonable people, that's the solution that we'll reach.
Josh Hawley.
David, I don't support a nationwide ban. I do support reasonable federal restrictions, limits on abortion, like partial birth abortion, like when the baby is capable of feeling pain. What I will not support is imposing on the state of Missouri and all the other states abortion on demand through 9 months with taxpayer funding. That's what Lucas Kunce wants. That's what the Democrats in Congress have repeatedly tried to force on us. And now they want to go further. In fact, Lucas Kunce and his allies want to go further. They are trying to change our Constitution in this state this year to not only on abortion, but to overturn our ban in the state on transgender surgeries for minors. That's on the ballot this fall. Lucas Kunce and his allies are supporting it. They talk about reproductive health, but what it really does is it allows transgender surgeries for minors without parental consent. I think it's nuts. I think it's absolutely crazy. I voted against it in the Senate, and I would love to hear Lucas Kunce explain to Missouri why he's in favor of it.
Lucas, we'll give you 30 seconds for
Chance,
rebuttal.
huh?
You go.
Look, I mean, this is what politicians do election year, right? They lie, they lie, they lie. It's everything the man said on TV about me and things like that, right? It's not true. He has co-sponsored a national abortion ban to override the will of Missouri voters. It has nothing to do with sex change surgeries. He sees mandated sex change surgeries around every single corner because he thinks that he can rile people up that way and actually win the election. It's not true. What I see is a people and women in this state who are smart enough to make their own decisions about how they build their families, about how they protect their families, about how they raise them. I think Missourians are smart enough to make their own decisions, and I'm gonna make sure they can do that.
Josh Hawley, 30 seconds.
Don't take my word for it. The ACLU, the National Women's Law Center, Planned Parenthood have all said that reproductive health care means gender-affirming surgeries. It means hormone treatments. It means puberty blockers for minors. That's what Kunce and his allies, with a pile of dark money from outside of the state, are trying to get put into our Constitution. It would overturn Missouri's laws. It's absolutely nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Now, if he wants to change his position on the stage now, I'm all for it. I welcome it. I'd also love to hear if he's going to vote for Kamala Harris. I'm going to keep track. We haven't heard it yet, but I'm going to ask throughout the debate. But I'm telling you, read the text. He's not being honest with you.
Now going to move to our next question. It comes from Alvin Reed, and it will go first to Lucas Kunce.
Congress has been unable to come to any kind of legislative policy on the subject of immigration. What do you think Congress can realistically do to help manage the flow of immigrants at the southern border of the United States?
Lucas Kunce.
I was a Marine for a long time. I mentioned that before, 13 years on active duty. And before I led a police training team in Iraq, I was scheduled to be on a border team there. And so as a Marine, I went to the southern border. I trained with the Border Patrol. I was certified by the Border Patrol Tactical Unit. And there's very simple solutions here that we can bring to the cause, right? Like we need to stop the flow of fentanyl, vote for fentanyl machines. We have fentanyl scanners. Most of it comes through regular port of entries. Josh Hawley voted against funding fentanyl scanners in a Homeland Security bill. We need to fully fund and equip Border Patrol, something he repeatedly voted against. When Roy Blunt, who's from this area, negotiated a bipartisan bill that Donald Trump signed, Josh Hawley voted against it. And, he voted against the recent bill to end catch and release programs that the Border Patrol guys who I trained with actually supported and endorsed. So what we need to do here is end catch and release, stop the flow of fentanyl, fully fund and equip Border Patrol. I stand beside every single one of those things, and that's what I'm going to do as a U.S. Senator.
Jared Young.
Immigration is an area where I think most Americans, most Missourians agree on two truths. The first truth is that we need secure borders. The second truth is that we need legal immigrants. They're an incredibly important part of our economy, an important part of our culture. And it should be possible for us to form policy that acknowledges both of those truths. The only thing getting in the way of that is partisan warfare. And we saw that 6 or 7 months ago when a bipartisan bill was negotiated in the Senate that acknowledged both of those truths and made progress in a lot of these areas. But the bill was killed not because it was bad policy, purely because of politics, because one side didn't want to give the other side a win. And that's what we have to end. There are lots of good ideas out there, lots of good policies that we just have to be willing to sit down and talk about them without throwing stones at each other.
Josh Hawley?
The answer on immigration is to close the border, reinstate the Remain in Mexico program and the Safe Third Country protocols, which this administration tore up. Now, as to that bipartisan border bill that Lucas Kunz just mentioned, it was a terrible bill. It would have allowed 5,000 people across the border every day, 5,000, before you could close it. It would have increased the number of green cards by an astronomical number. It would have mandated taxpayer funding for illegals' lawyers. So you bet I voted against it. But it's no surprise, Lucas Kunz opposes a border wall. Lucas Kunz wants amnesty for illegals in this country. That's 15 million in the last 3 years. And then he wants to put them, after he's given them the amnesty, on Social Security and Medicare. You want to bankrupt Social Security and Medicare? Put 15 to 20 million illegals on those programs. That's his plan. It's absolutely nuts. It's crazy. And I still haven't heard an answer as to whether or not he's voting for Trump or Kamala.
Nathan Klein.
All right, the immigration crisis in this country is driven by the climate crisis. The reason why people are piling up at the border is because family farmers are failing because of drought, hurricanes, and that's only going to get much worse. Okay, beating up the weakest people in our society, desperate people. People don't flee their homes unless there's fire there. They're running for their lives. And the United States has always been the most welcoming place in the world for immigrants, and it's been our secret weapon and our best strength. So what we need at the border is more people to process applications, okay? We don't need more guards. We don't need to militarize the border. These are our neighbors. Immigrants are less violent in this country than natural-born Americans. U.S. citizens are bringing most of the fentanyl across the border, not immigrants. Immigrants are coming here to work hard and to strengthen America, and that's what we should understand and take to heart.
Lucas, would you like 30 seconds to respond to Senator Hawley's description of your immigration
I would.
plan?
Thank you very much. He's lying again. Like, it's election year, the guy's got a lie. I don't oppose a border wall. If we are in a situation where we got to decide what finances we have and what we're going to put them towards, that's probably the least effective thing. That doesn't mean that I oppose it. I don't support amnesty for people who came here the wrong way. I support a path to citizenship for people who came here the right way, and for the Afghan and Iraq interpreters who supported me and helped me when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've never said anything about giving people free health care like this. I think remain in Mexico is a fine policy. I think we can have that in place along with ending catch and release. Like, the sad thing here is that Josh Hawley has voted against keeping us safe 3 times because, as Jared said, he wants to keep it as a campaign issue rather than look at the train wreck that we have going on and actually support everyday people and keep us safe, stop the flow of fentanyl, etc.
Senator Hawley, 30
In
seconds.
2022, you told a Vote Smart survey you oppose a border wall. You said in 2022 and 2023 you are for citizenship for people who are here illegally. You have also endorsed, we are fact-checking Lucas in real time. You can look right now on social media. We'll post up his voting scorecard. We'll post up everything he said. He has also endorsed Medicare for everybody. He wants to give all of these folks amnesty and then Medicare and Social Security, which actuarial analysis shows will bankrupt the program. That's just the facts. Listen, I've got people like this and before me in the Senate all the time who change their stories. I'm used to getting accountability, and we're going to get it today.
Josh, you're used to lying, and you're continuing to do that. I support health care for United States.
We're going to move to the next question here. The next question will come from Christine, and it will go first to Jared Young.
Many of the income cuts passed by Congress in 2017 are due to expire at the end of next year. Do you support the extension of these tax cuts, or do you think some taxes should be allowed to rise, such as on high-income earners or corporations? Are there any additional tax cuts you support, such as expanding the child tax credit or repealing the income tax on tips or overtime pay?
Jared Young.
Okay, so there's a lot in that question, but I'm glad you asked it because one of the things that doesn't get talked about on the national stage right now by either party is our national debt and our increasingly ridiculous deficit spending. As long as we continue to ignore this problem, it's a ticking time bomb. It's going to blow up on us, and we have to have leaders that are willing to tackle it. Now, solving that issue is going to require some hard decisions. It'll require both cuts in spending and increases in revenue. So when we talk about the 2017 tax cuts, I think those led to a lot of great things for our economy. But we have to make sure we're being really smart about which things we extend and which things we let go. I'm in favor of things like raising the Social Security cap on high-income earners. I'm in favor of things like means testing Social Security so that we can get that program back on a solvent path. But I'm also never a fan of raising taxes. So we just have to be smart, and we have to be able to live within our means and start making decisions that will lead us down that path.
Josh Hawley.
I do favor increasing the child tax credit. In fact, I just voted to expand it just a couple of weeks ago. I do favor eliminating taxes on tips and on overtime pay. I think that's terrific for workers. What I will not support is the kind of energy tax that Lucas Kuntz will impose by ditching all fossil fuels. He told American Prospect magazine in 2021, you can read the article, we'll post it, that he wants to ditch all fossil fuels immediately, not just oil, all fossil fuels. He wants to decarbonize our entire economy for a cost of $4.5 trillion. That's his estimate. The taxes that will result on for Missouri families are astronomical. The loss of jobs is unimaginable. The loss of biofuels in this state will be devastating. The loss of industry in this state will be unimaginable. And if you think we're too dependent on China now, wait until he gets his way. It's nutty. It's absolutely nutty. And there's no way that I'd support it. It'd be terrible for this state.
Nathan Klein.
All right, well, tax policy in this country has gotten real goofed up since when it used to work. I support something like the Eisenhower-Nixon tax rates of the 1950s, the greatest era of widespread prosperity and shared power amongst Americans. The Eisenhower-Nixon tax rates had the top tax rate at 91%. The blue team and the red team are arguing it down in the 20s, and we know the rich and powerful have so many tax cuts they don't even pay taxes at all. So what we need to do is raise the taxes on the wealthiest Americans, 3 of whom own more wealth, have more power than 50% of all Americans. That is a moral crisis and the root of the struggles of American families. We need to go back to the era of redistributed progressive taxation that led to the greatest era of American shared prosperity. And I'm the only person on this stage that will stand up for that, for sure.
Lucas Kuntz.
Sure. So before we start the time, am I doing this whole national security energy stuff first? Do I save that? Do I just do a minute and a half? What's the plan?
Or does only those two
It's your
guys
time.
get to talk more?
What's that?
It's your
Only
time.
these 2 guys get to talk more.
Well, I'm asking, do I get another 30 after the minute?
No, you get a minute, and then there's 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, well, I support tax cuts for everybody under $400,000. We're going to keep those. I will always stand beside working people every single day because that's who supported me and my family when we were going bankrupt. Period. If you're getting tips, they shouldn't be taxed, and I'm for expanding the child tax credit. Like, we need to take care of working people in this country. As for what that also means, it means putting America first in the next generation of energy and manufacturing. I have a Marshall Plan for the Midwest to build out that energy and manufacturing, have good union jobs right here in the Midwest. Josh Hawley's voted against investment here every single chance that he gets, and when he talks about energy and China, he is letting China get ahead by being in the pocket of oil companies, right? And that's not where we should be right now. We should be investing in the next generation because what's going to happen is we're going to swap out a cartel of energy people run by the Saudis, the Venezuelans, and the Russians for China if we don't make the investments in the next generation of energy. He doesn't want to do that because he's owned by oil companies. I think it's gross. It's bad for America. It's bad for America's energy. It's bad for all of us. It's bad for our energy future. It is a real national security issue where we have to take control of our future on this.
Senator Hawley, would you like 30 seconds on the oil
I
companies?
would. Number one, I don't take corporate contributions. Number two, I didn't hear any response to the reality, the fact that Lucas Kuntz wants to, quote, ditch all fossil fuels, not just oil, he says, all fossil fuels, all. That will absolutely devastate this state. It will devastate this state. It might be fine for the green energy wackos, but it will not work in the state of Missouri. We're talking about no gas and diesel. We're talking about no way to harvest the crops, no way to plant the crops, no biofuels to blend. It's his plan, American Prospect Magazine. Go read it. He wrote it literally, $4.5 trillion. The taxes that will result in for middle-class families, the devastation will be unimaginable. It's totally nutty.
Lucas Kuntz.
Yeah, again, that's absolutely ridiculous. I'm talking about us owning our energy future 50 years from now, making the investments so that we can actually get there and we aren't beholden to China on the next generation of energy because that's who's going to own it. That is who is going to control it. That's who's taking it over right now because people like Josh Hawley won't make the investment in the next generation of energy. We are going to be behind. As for our oil and gas right now, I'm fine with us extracting it. The one thing that I want to add to it is I want to make sure it doesn't go overseas. I think there should be an export ban on all of our fossil fuels so that it stays right here. It keeps the prices down while we make this transition to the future, because if we don't make that transition, we are going to lose.
Nathan Klein, do you want 30 seconds on the green energy wackos?
I would like, because I'm one of those green energy wackos. All right, folks, we need to get realistic, okay? All of the climate scientists have been telling us for generations, and we're talking with thousands of PhDs in dozens of fields all over the world, that if we don't stop burning fossil fuels, that human civilization is it's existential crisis. We only have about 35 years worth of fossil fuels left at current use rates, people. We have to get realistic. None of these people are realistic, okay? We have to get off of them, and we have to figure out how we're going to live without them, because human civilization is going to collapse long before we even get to burn it all. Wake up.
We're going to move on to the next question. It comes from Lucas Presson, and it goes first to Josh Hawley. Your question?
Polls say inflation is going to be one of the top issues in this election year. Many people have been frustrated by the higher costs of food, prescription drugs, housing, and general living expenses. What do you blame for this situation? Is there anything that you believe Congress can do to address it?
Josh Hawley.
Thank you. The cause of this is because the liberals in power, Lucas Kuntz's allies, followed his plan and shut down American energy production. Joe Biden came right into office, shut down American energy production. And that caused inflation to absolutely surge. You want to fix the inflation problem? Reopen American energy. And that includes right here in the state of Missouri. We blend 250 million gallons of biodiesel, 300 million gallons of ethanol every single year in the state. Kuntz's plan to ditch all fossil fuel. He just said a second ago, I want to protect exports. Go read his piece. We're posting it right now. Ditch all fossil fuel. He says he wants to push us to electric vehicles. Do you know where those are made? 70% of them made in China. Do you know who controls the electric vehicle component manufacturing? It's China. Do you know where we will be getting our energy if we can't use our own fossil fuels and biofuels? It'll be China. We will be dependent on the Chinese communists if Lucas Kuntz has his way. Now, again, if he wants to change his position and renounce his article, I'm all ears. I still haven't heard an answer as to who he's voting for. Maybe he likes President Trump's energy policy. He can tell us right now. I'd yield the balance of my time if he wants to answer that.
Nathan Klein.
Is the question about inflation, or is the question about?
Questions about inflation.
Okay. Last time we had this kind of inflation in this country, okay, was during the Nixon administration in the 70s. What did Nixon, no kind of communist, okay, do? He ordered a price freeze in this country because companies were gouging the American consumer, okay? And he said, if you raise your taxes, I will put you in jail, okay? Nobody on this stage are all far to the right of Richard Nixon, okay? I'm saying that we need government to come to the aid of the tax-paying citizen and stop being servants of the price-gouging multinational corporations and billionaires that are the reason for this inflation.
Lucas Kuntz.
Yeah, I just want to thank Josh Hawley for proving my point on China and energy. They are controlling the next generation of our energy. That's why we need to make the investments here so that doesn't end up being what's happening. You're exactly right. That is where we are headed. That's Josh Hawley's world. It's not the world that I want to live in. As for inflation, he's lying again. The reason we are extracting more energy here than we ever have before. The thing that's holding it back is Exxon CEOs who don't want to extract more. Whatever you think about that, that's the reason for the gas situation we're in. But inflation is coming from his corporate buddies, the same guys who got him elected in 2018, gouging us. They took advantage of the pandemic. They raised prices because of supply chain woes. They kept the prices high. They're literally just price gouging us. You can see that in record corporate profits, and you can see that in the massive amount of share buybacks that they're doing. As a U.S. Senator, I will vote to ban share buybacks because what that is that's a transfer of wealth from everyday people upward to a shareholder class that frankly just doesn't need it. And he loves supporting them because that's who put him in office.
Jared Young.
You asked what I think has caused inflation. I agree with Senator Hawley that the energy policies of the Biden administration have contributed to it. I also think the runaway government spending of the last 4 to 6 years has greatly contributed to it. If you flood the market with capital, prices are naturally going to go up. Now, inflation has slowed down over the last few months. What we need to make sure we do is we give wages a chance to catch up because people are still hurting. And there are a number of suggestions out there being talked about at the presidential level that are going to hurt inflation. They're going to increase inflation. That includes broad tariffs. Tariffs will not hurt other countries. They will hurt American consumers. We need to use targeted tariffs to punish bad actors, but not use broad tariffs because they will raise prices. We also should avoid a huge increase in the corporate tax rate. I'm the only person on the stage who's been a CEO who's run a business. I understand how businesses respond when their costs go up. They respond by raising prices, and they respond by cutting their own costs. That means it hurts employees and it hurts consumers. So we need to be careful that we continue to ride this lowering inflation and not do anything that's going to exacerbate it.
Senator Hawley, you like 30 seconds.
David, it is not investment in America to ditch America's fossil fuels. Lucas Combs keeps saying we need to invest in America. Absolutely we do. That's not what he would do. Ditching our fossil fuels, shutting down our energy production, stopping biofuels in Missouri, that's not investing in America. That's bankrupting America. That's the problem. That's what he wants. $4.5 trillion, his energy plan. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. And the idea that closing down American energy production hasn't led to higher costs, go tell that to the Americans who can't afford gas. They can't afford groceries for their kids. It's because of his policies. And I still haven't heard if he's voting for Kamala.
Lucas.
Yeah, my policies have nothing to do with this. What I'm talking about is putting us in charge of our energy future. That's it. I want us to control our energy. Josh doesn't care about that. Right now, we are controlled by a cartel that consists of multinational corporations like Exxon, who specifically said, their CEO said, I don't make decisions based on what's good for America. I make decisions based on what's good for me. A cartel led by that guy, the Saudis, the Venezuelans, and the Russians, and he's proposing replacing that with a cartel led by China in the future. Absolutely not. We need to make the investments in the next generation of energy so that we can move beyond that cartel controlling our energy costs.
We're going to go to the next question. It's coming from Alvin, and it will go first to Nathan Klein. Alvin?
All right, let's discuss healthcare costs. They continue to rise, placing a significant financial burden on families and individuals across Missouri. What specific policies would you support to reduce the cost of healthcare while ensuring that quality care remains accessible to all?
Nathan Klein.
Well, Alvin, as you should know, as we should know, is the United States pays twice as much money per person as any other country in the world, and yet has worse outcomes than any of our peers. This is profound failure. And you go to blue states that are completely controlled by the blue team and red states completely controlled by the red team, and you have the same exact problem, okay? Because they take lots and lots of money from insurance companies and hospital corporations, et cetera, maximizes the profitability of those corporations, but it puts Americans in the poorhouse, makes grandma not be able to pay for her medication, makes working families not know how they're going to have a baby, okay? Now, what we need to have is universal, single-payer, government-funded health care like every other industrialized country in the world, but neither the blue team or red team will give it to you. Only the green team will. I'd be happy to take your vote and fight for you.
Lucas Coons.
You know, this issue is personal to me. As a kid, my family went bankrupt from medical bills, and we didn't make it because country club politicians like Josh Hawley were there for us. We made it because the people in our neighborhood who had no more money than we did passed the plate for us down in my mom's prayer group and brought more food by the house than we could eat. I think that's wrong. I don't think you should go bankrupt in this country because you've decided to have a kid. I think that's criminal. It should be changed. And, you know, that's why I'm so proud to take no corporate PAC donations, but also to take no money from any pharmaceutical executive, no big pharma executives. And I think we need to, you know, one thing I saw that happened recently was we capped the price on insulin. That needed to happen. Josh Hawley voted against that. I think we need to enforce our antitrust laws because these big hospital systems are buying up small providers and they're shutting them down so that we have to travel for our insurance. We need to stop share buybacks. Insurance companies have conducted $140 billion in share buybacks over the last few years. That's money, that was our money. That was our money we paid in premiums that they gave back to them. And the last thing is we have pharmaceutical benefit managers, PBMs, that are running the pharmaceutical pharmaceutical industry as middlemen, and they're literally just cutting the pharmaceutical companies out so they can't do anything. They're cutting the small pharmacists out, and they're taking all the profit for themselves and gouging us at the register. It's wrong. They need to be broken up.
Jared Young.
I think the thing that makes America great, that's made our economy so great, is free market forces. We have unleashed the free market, and the sectors of our economy work best when the players in those sectors are subject to market forces. And I think the problem in healthcare, I think we all acknowledge that there are problems in healthcare. The problem is that so many of the players have not been subject to market forces. So I'm in favor of reforms, including with PBMs, including with insurance providers, that make sure they're being subject to the same market pressures, the same competition that players in other sectors of the economy are subject to. That's what will create efficiencies. I'm not in favor of the government taking over healthcare. If you think healthcare is painful and inefficient right now, wait till the government takes it over. You won't like what you get.
Josh Hawley.
Yeah, the answer is, number one, we should cap the cost of prescription drugs. And I mean all prescription drugs. These pharma companies, they charge us one price. They charge the Canadians and the Europeans something half or less than that. I've introduced legislation that would say whatever price they pick in Europe or Canada is what they can charge here in the United States of America. They're making money hand over fist. No more of that. We should cap the cost of insulin. Lucas Kunz just lied to you. I was one of only, I think, 6 or 7 Republicans who voted to cap insulin prices. I've introduced a bill to cap insulin prices. We'll fact check him right now on social media. I tell you what I wouldn't do. I would not put illegal immigrants on Medicare. What I would not do is take 15 or 20 million illegals, give them amnesty like Lucas Kunz has advocated for years now, and then put them on Medicare. That will bankrupt the Medicare system. It is wrong for our seniors. It is wrong for those American citizens who have paid in for years to that program and rely on it, literally for life-saving help, to have illegals take it away and bankrupt them. And Lucas Kunz is wrong to propose it.
If you'd like 30 seconds, Lucas, go ahead.
Well, I mean, on the instant claps, he voted for it before he voted against it. I think we've seen that quite a bit out there, right? And as far as the immigrants he's just making this up. Like, I have never proposed that, and I don't think that it's right. I do think, however, that U.S. citizens, like my family, who went bankrupt from medical bills, and like those in that neighborhood, should have access to affordable health care and shouldn't be getting gouged and robbed by PBMs, by insurance companies, and all your other buddies. I think it's wrong, and we got to do something about it.
Josh Hawley, our 30-second rebuttal rule kicks it back to you.
Yo, sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, you notice now he did just admit I did vote to cap insulin, so thank you. We'll still fact check it. Listen, when you say that you want amnesty for 15 to 20 million illegals, when you say that you want Medicare, you have. In 2022, in the vote survey, in the last Senate race, you said it. In 2023, you said it again. You have endorsed repeatedly Medicare for everybody, which, by the way, includes illegals now. You've endorsed these plans. We'll put it all online as I'm speaking. You can go there right now.
I also heard
whoa, David. Whoa. Well, you're doing that too.
You're not going to
Okay.
So here's
Lucas.
time, and I'm going to take it.
David.
Our 30 seconds is about over here. We're going to move on to the next question.
I think it's my time, isn't it?
Well,
It's my time.
Let's let Nathan go.
we're going to move on to the next question. And
Just
this
finish
question
this.
is going to come from Christine, and it's going to go to Lucas Kunz first.
Former President Donald Trump has proposed steep tariffs on imports from China. Do you support a more aggressive tariff policy toward China? Or do you have concerns this ultimately would harm American consumers?
Lucas Kunz.
When I was at the Pentagon, I did arms control negotiations. I did counter weapons and mass destruction. I was a Marine stationed there on the Joint Staff. And I actually extended for a year to work in Donald Trump's Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering office. And the reason I did that is because I see our competition with China as one of the greatest threats that we have right now, and I see them getting ahead on literally everything, including energy, which we've talked about a lot tonight. And so for me, I think this is about keeping America in charge of its own national security. I think we should have tariffs. And I also think that needs to come with, like that tariff money, anything we get from that needs to be put into investment where we are counteracting what they're doing. Because, if that money just ends up going to shareholders, et cetera, it's not going to work out. Like, we have to invest in our energy future. We have to invest in our production. I mean, when I was at the Pentagon, we had a study where we found you can't make a single major weapon system without inputs from China. That's crazy. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That's crazy. But that's a result of Josh Hawley's policy. It's a result of his laissez-fairness and his ignorance of national security.
Jared Young.
I spoke against tariffs earlier, but I do agree with tariffs against China. The point of tariffs is to punish countries who are not playing the game fairly. China is clearly one of those countries. We need to have a stronger stance against China. I agree with Lucas and with Josh, frankly, that China is one of the biggest threats to our national security. We have to be tough with them economically. We have to be tough with them from a national security perspective. So when it comes to tariffs, while I oppose broad tariffs, I think those will increase prices and hurt the economy. I think targeted tariffs against China are the right thing to do.
Josh Hawley.
Yes is the answer to your question. I support President Trump's tariff agenda. I support tariffs on China. I support tariffs that protect American industry and will bring back good-paying jobs right here to the state of Missouri. Now, I noticed that Lucas Kuntz just mentioned Donald Trump yet again. He's got an ad on TV where he has Trump's name up there and is proud to have worked for Trump. Big bear hug to Trump, big kiss to Trump, but I haven't heard if he's voting for Trump. I haven't heard who he's voting for at all. So he was fussing about time a second ago. I'll yield the rest of mine. Look, I got a lot left. I'll yield the rest of it to Lucas to tell us who he's voting for.
I'll tell you right now, I will work
Who are you voting for?
I will work with anyone in the U.S. Senate to bring money back to Missouri,
Who are you voting for?
Invest in Missouri,
It's
and put us
Nathan
in front of
Klein's
China.
turn here. So, Nathan?
Well, the blue team and the red team act like, they're all against each other here. They skipped hand in hand together in all these bad trade deals that have put us in this situation with China. Almost all of them together, past, most favored trading status for China and NAFTA and GATT and all these bad deals, okay? And now they're like arguing over, the wreckage that they've caused. We need different leadership that is going to, number one, we have a low energy future in the future if we're going to survive on this planet. And we need to make self-sustaining communities that feed themselves, produce their own energy, and et cetera. All of these international supply chains are going away, people. We need to have leadership that recognizes this and takes us out of the burning building that we're in, which is the climate crisis, and towards a sustainable future that our children and grandchildren can continue to live on this planet. And there's only one party that's talking about that, and that's the Green Party.
Okay, the next question will come from Lucas Presson. It will go first to Jared Young. Lucas, your question.
Russia's war against Ukraine has been going on for 2.5 years. The U.S. has supplied both money and weapons to Ukraine. Do you support the United States' continued military and financial support for Ukraine? Explain why or why not, and what is the solution to end the war?
Jared Young.
Yes, I support continued support to Ukraine. I believe that Russia and China and Iran represent a serious threat to our country. They are actively working to undermine our interests. They're actively working to undermine the world order that's served us so well for the last 60 or 70 years. And in order to push back, we need to have a strong stance. We are at a stage where our allies don't trust us and our enemies don't fear us. And both the Trump administration and the Biden administration have contributed to that problem. So we have to be strong against our enemies. Now in Ukraine, in terms of how to end the war, I think we need to give more support, more consistent support to Ukraine. Yes, we've given them lots of money and lots of weapons, but it's always been slow and it's always been it's too little, too late.
Josh Hawley.
No is the answer to your question. I do not support continued funding to Ukraine. We've spent, $200 billion on Ukraine? By the way, we haven't tracked a penny of it. The Senate has repeatedly voted down my efforts to track every single penny of what we're spending. We have absolutely no idea. Lucas Kuntz has been in favor of unlimited funding for Ukraine. He's tweeted about it. He's talked about it. He's written about it. We need to stand by Ukraine, more money to Ukraine. I'll tell you this. In St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Charles, as we sit here right now, there is nuclear radiation in the soil, in the water, in the air, under homes. I think it's time we spent some money compensating the victims of that radiation, cleaning that up before we spend another penny in Ukraine, while our allies, by the way, in Europe, like Germany, sit there contributing next to nothing compared to us. So I don't support the Ukraine First policy of Lucas Kuntz and his allies. I don't support hundreds of billions of dollars more in Ukraine spending. What I do support is taking care of our people, taking care of the folks right here in this state who are hurting and dying of the highest rates of cancer in the nation as we sit here. That ought to be our priority.
Nathan Klein.
The disastrous war in Ukraine is a perfect example of the blue team and the red team skipping hand in hand to Armageddon, okay? Both of them have been through blue team and red team administrations since the end of the Cold War, when Bush Sr. promised Gorbachev that NATO would not be moved 1 inch toward the Russian border. Now we're trying to push into Ukraine. The Russian bear has been pushed into the corner. It's our military projection on their border, not their military projection onto our border. We have over 800 foreign military bases. No other country has 5. Okay? We need to stop this aggressive military posture around the world, which is just making their wealthy weapons manufacturers a whole bunch of money, but endangering us, and bring that investment back to our communities to serve the tax-paying American working class, health care, education, transportation, etc. That's where it should go, and stop endangering us with their aggressive foreign military adventures.
Lucas Coons.
You know, there's a fun video of Josh Hawley, I'll have the team post it, of him ranting and raving about how Joe Biden is not giving Ukraine enough help and enough weapons, and saying that's what Ukraine needs, that's what Ukraine's asked for. Again, this guy, he just flips and flops on everything that during election year when he thinks it's going to help him out. Is the only person, as far as I know up here, who's ever worn a uniform, who has ever put boots on ground in a foreign country. You know, in Iraq, I led a police training there. I had team there. I had 12 Marines and a Navy corpsman who my job was to conduct the mission and get us home safely, which thank God we did. I deployed to Afghanistan twice. I can tell you right now, the number one thing we need to do is make sure we do not put boots on the ground somewhere else. Our aid to Ukraine at $200 billion is infinitely cheaper than the $6.4 trillion we spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, supposedly nation building there, once we put boots on the ground. Of course, I think we should do the cheaper option. And what I don't want to do is what he wants to do, and that's set us up for a war with China. Because if you think Iraq and Afghanistan were too expensive, I'm going to tell you what, a war with China is something that none of us can ever afford.
30 seconds if you'd like it. Go ahead.
Well, I think we just heard there was a word salad worthy of Kamala Harris, so we won't say who he's voting for. But what you notice he did say is that he supports continued funding for Ukraine. I do not. I have voted repeatedly against it and been attacked repeatedly for it by members of my own party, which I'm absolutely fine with, because my priority is Missouri. My priority is this country. And so long as nuclear radiation victims in this state are not compensated, I'm not going to vote for a dime more funding for Ukraine. I don't have to hem and haw about it like he just did. I can tell you straight out, just like I can tell you who I'm voting for this November. And Lucas, we're still waiting.
I'm going to take my 30 seconds
Go
on
ahead,
that.
Lucas, 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Again, I'm the only person up here who has ever worn a uniform. This guy popped popcorn and watched the invasion of Iraq. Absolutely despicable behavior. Again, he doesn't care about people in uniform. He would have us go to a war with China, and he doesn't want to do the right thing here, which is keep boots off the ground in Ukraine and in Europe. Like, we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. That will be the biggest tax on middle-class people in this state that you have literally ever seen in your entire life.
The next question comes from Alvin, and it goes first to Josh Hawley. Alvin, your question?
Okay, the war between Israel and Hamas has resulted in thousands of deaths. Ceasefire talks appear to be unproductive. Should the United States should the support for Israel's efforts be contingent on certain factors? And do you believe the U.S. should be doing more than it already is to also provide aid to Palestinian residents?
Josh Hawley.
No to both. No, we should not condition our aid to Israel. And no, I think we should not pressure Israel into a ceasefire. Listen, I just 2 days ago in the Senate had a hearing at which I sat and listened to a witness sitting as close to me as you are now try to tell me that all of the anti-Semitism and violence against Jewish Americans on campus wasn't really happening and wasn't real. It is real. The attack on Israel is real. We should be standing unequivocally with our ally Israel, not talking about ceasefires, not talking about how we can help Hamas. We should be saying to Israel, get the job done. And for those folks here in this country on our campuses, they ought to be safe. Lucas Kuntz was talking about a ceasefire on October 7th. On October 7th, he tweeted, we need a ceasefire. We don't need a ceasefire until Hamas is eliminated. And I'd also like to hear from Lucas Kuntz, is he going to condemn what has happened on our campuses in this country, where Jewish students fear for their lives, because of the pro-Hamas demonstrators and protesters who are threatening to kill them, threatening to run them off campuses? It is absolutely despicable, and I'd like to hear if he's going to condemn it.
Nathan Klein.
What's going on in the Middle East has been going on for a long, long time, okay? This is not a new situation. the international community has demanded that the Israelis, including the United States, evacuate all of their settlements from the Palestinian territories. And the Palestinians have a state. Right now, the United States by itself at the UN is stopping the world from doing something because of our veto at the Security Council to stop this mass murder in Gaza, okay? We've got two criminal operations, Hamas and the Israeli government. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with war crimes. And the United States, if the United States would simply let the world act, then the murder would stop tomorrow and we could move to negotiations and a settled peace in which two states with two respected people can live side by side. And that's what we need to move toward and stop sending billions of dollars for bombs to pour gas on that fire.
Lucas Kuntz.
I believe there's no place for anti-Semitism or any type of hate on our college campuses or anywhere in this country. And I think if you look back in time, the person who spews the most hate up on this stage is the guy all the way to my left. And as for what happened on October 7th, I think it was an absolute tragedy. You know, kids at a music festival and everything that went along with that. I think Israel had a right to defend themselves. And I think what we've seen over the months since then is, that defense has led to thousands and thousands of civilian lives being lost. And as far as I know, I'm the only person here who's been in a war zone, both Iraq and Afghanistan. I can tell you right now that killing all of the civilians or having thousands and thousands of civilians die does not bring about peace. Taliban has Afghanistan right now. ISIS is still running through Iraq. We killed a lot of people there. That's not how this works. I think we need to get to a negotiated ceasefire that brings back the hostages. I think that should be one of the conditions. Because really, for everybody's peace and security, that's going to be the best. It's going to be best for Israel, it's going to be the best for Palestine, and it's going to be the best for all of us.
Jared Young.
I think I'm the only person on the stage who's actually lived in the area we're talking about. I lived in Amman, which is about 40 miles from Jerusalem, and I spent months making friends with people who are displaced Palestinians, so I deeply understand the history there and what's led us to this point. However, what happened on October 7th was an atrocity. Israel absolutely has a right to defend itself. I believe Israel is trying to show restraint as it pursues the destruction of Hamas, has a right to destroy Hamas, but Hamas is an enemy that deliberately puts civilians in the path of danger. So I think we should continue to support Israel. They're an important ally in the region. They're the only functioning democracy in the region. But I also think we should be exerting our influence on Israel to look for a long-term solution. If Israel thinks it can just return to the status quo and everything will be okay, that's not going to work. History is just going to repeat itself over and over and over again. So we must find a long-term solution to the issue.
Okay, we have time for one last question here. And
rebuttal. I did live in Iraq for way too long.
Our last question will come from Christine, and we'll go first to Nathan Klein.
The use of artificial intelligence is growing rapidly in the business world, schools, and even in some political campaigns. Are there specific steps that Congress should take to establish guardrails around this technology?
Nathan Klein.
Of course we should. Of course we should, but the folks on this stage besides me think that the market should determine everything. Let the private market do whatever it wants. We shouldn't regulate the private market. It's a magic trick that makes everything perfect. Of course, if we just let AI be developed in a private lab somewhere, we all know that there's a lot of danger there. We need to take that technology and regulate its development so that it serves us, not enslaves us. We know how dangerous this is. We need to put the American people priority here, and we need to regulate the development of this. And right now, that's not happening at all. And so I and the Green Party will make sure that this technology is developed responsibly, carefully. There's no reason to rush into this.
Lucas Kuntz.
When I was at the Pentagon, I worked for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, doing counterproliferation work and then doing arms control treaties. And one of the kind of scary things we saw in that treaty work was the proliferation of AI and weapon systems and the fact that we don't have any treaties, we don't have any laws governing that. And so one of the things that we definitely need to do is make sure that we work with other countries to develop treaties so that we don't have an escalation in warfare on this. And the second part of that also ties to national security on AI is we can't let China win this race. Like, we have to get involved. We can't let our big tech companies run rampant. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to get in there. We need people who understand the issue, the national security implications, and we need to make sure that, again, just like on energy, China doesn't control this future, or some other country that's not friendly to us doesn't control the future of AI.
Jared Young.
With any new technology, there's a lot of fear surrounding it and a lot of uncertainty. I certainly agree that we need to take steps to protect people from the worst aspects of AI, like deep fakes, and protect our children. But we also need to be careful that we don't stifle innovation. And so getting the government too deeply involved is going to stifle innovation and prevent a lot of good from happening from AI. I agree with Lucas that we need to be considering the national security perspective and get quickly involved on that so we can get ahead of it and not find ourselves behind the ball.
Josh Hawley.
We ought to pass my bill with Senator Amy Klobuchar to ban deepfakes in our elections. We shouldn't be using deepfake technology, AI technology, to deceive voters. It's absolutely wrong, and all AI-generated images, voice needs to be labeled. We've seen, actually, in both presidential primaries this year, attempts to use AI in a deceptive manner, both on the Republican and the Democrat side. I think that's just a taste of what is coming. And let's not forget who controls AI in this country. It's these mega corporations. It's the same big tech companies. We ought to hold them accountable, and we ought to protect our kids from deep fakes. The porn industry, the deep fakes that they are creating, ruining young people's lives. We ought to allow those victims to sue in order to protect themselves. Now, the time has nearly expired and the debate is nearly over, and I haven't heard an answer to my signal question, which is, who is Lucas Kunce supporting in the most important election on the ballot, let's just be honest, this year, the presidential. So I got 15 seconds left. I'll give it back, David, if Lucas would like to answer.
That concludes our question period. It's now time to move to our closing statements. Josh Hawley, you're the first to deliver your closing statement, and you may proceed.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks to the Missouri Press Association. We have 15 million illegals who have come across the border just in the last 3 years. We have gas prices that no one can afford, grocery prices that no one can afford. Nobody can afford their mortgage or their rent. And Lucas Kunce wants to double down on every single failed policy that got us here. In fact, it's his policies and his friends, his allies in power, that have brought us to this point. So my question for you is simple. Do you like the direction of this country? Because if it's working for you, go ahead and vote for him and his friends. But if you want to change, if you think that we can do better, if you think we can bring jobs back to America, if you think that we can get good paying jobs back in Missouri, if you think we can close our border and protect Medicare and Social Security for our citizens, I ask for your vote. I ask you to join me in working for change. I ask you to stand with me as we save this country. Thank you again for having me.
Jared Young.
Thank you for having me here today. In our polling and in my conversations with voters across the state for the past year, we've repeatedly had it confirmed that voters in Missouri are desperate for another option. And as you watch these two bicker up here, you can see exactly why. People are desperate for a dose of civility and reasonableness and common sense. And what we've discovered is that 43% of Missouri voters are independents. We are the largest voting bloc in Missouri by far. And 70% of Missouri voters are open to voting for a third party or independent candidate in this Senate race. So the voters don't need to be convinced, they just need to be educated. They need to know that they have a viable third option in this race. My campaign has more resources than any independent campaign in Missouri history. We will do everything in our power to make sure that people know they have a reasonable option this time around. Again, if we send Josh Hawley or Lucas Kunce to Washington, nothing will change about the way things work there. We have to have the courage to choose something truly different and better. And I'm the right person at the right time to make that happen, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Lucas Kunce.
Yeah, I think what we've seen today is Josh Hawley is willing to lie and say anything he can to get reelected. And that's what you're seeing on the TV ads he's running against me. It's what you're seeing right now. And the reason for that is because he's afraid. Right? He's afraid he's going to lose the $500,000 in book deals he's gotten while he's in the U.S. Senate when he's supposed to be working for us. He's afraid that the people in Missouri are going to realize that while Roy Blunt brought $300 million a year back to the state in earmarks during his last few years, Josh Hawley has brought zero back to our state the entire time he's been in the Senate. We literally can't afford that. That's $2 billion over the next 6 years. So if you want to fundamentally change who has power in this country, if you want to bring money back to our state, if you want to make it so everyday people can make their own decisions about their lives, I'm the only guy who's going to do that for you.
Nathan Klein.
I want to thank the Missouri Press Association once again for having me, even though they didn't let me talk as much as the other guys. The choice between the red and the blue team has most Americans not even bothering to vote anymore because they're not going to make a big difference in our lives. Whether you have one or the other in power, the corporate status quo stays in power. They do very little. They are like hands off. Let the market do it, leave it to the corporations. That's what they've been doing since the 1980s, and it's not working out very well, is it? Our society needs big changes. We all know it. There's only one change agent on this stage. There's only one change party, and that's the Green Party, because we don't take the corporate money. We serve the American people only, the way it should be. I recommend that no one ever vote again for a candidate that takes corporate donations, okay, or has dark money that they launder their corporate donations through so that they can say they don't take corporate money. But we know they got those billions, those millions of dollars from somewhere. I would love to have your vote because I'm the only one that will serve you. I'm the only qualified candidate on this stage because of that.
This concludes the Missouri Press Association forum for the U.S. Senate race in Missouri. I want to thank the candidates for a lively engagement here today, and now is the time to show them your applause.